Postseason basketball is finally here after a great end to the regular season for Tennessee basketball. It's all about what are they going to do in Nashville. Jimmy, we'll break that down for you here with Paige Dauer and Jimmy Hyams. The trip to Nashville, hopefully it's a little bit better than what it was last year for the men getting immediately bounced in an otherwise disappointing game. What do you think, I guess off the topic, what are your hopes for Tennessee realistically that they should do in the tournament this time?
This team has the potential to win it all. I mean, if you look at the strengths of this team, you got to love their point guard and Jahmai Ziegler. There aren't many point guards in the country better. Jahmai Mashack has just been named the National Defensive Player of the Year. Their defense is elite. It's among the top 5 in the nation as far as defensive adjustment. They have a very good scorer in Chaz Lanier. So there are a lot of things, elements about this team that I like. They've beaten 8 ranked opponents this year. They've got 11 quad 1 wins.
Yes.
Very few teams in the country have that many quad 1 wins. So this is a team that at its best, it's capable of winning the SEC tournament. So he has become a clutch player for them in many respects. And then we've seen Jahmai Mashack hitting some threes. How about that?
Yes.
So I do think this team is capable, even when it's not playing its best, is capable of beating a pretty good team.
And I think we specifically saw that almost disappointingly in the last game of the regular season against South Carolina, where somehow Igor, Milicic, and Jahmai Mashack were your offense in the opening minutes of the game, and then they were just abysmal from the free throw line. And typically, when you shoot that poorly from the line, you don't win those games. But I think because of their defense, Chaz helping a little bit of those runs start, they end up winning those games. So you would like to think in games that are ugly that they can win those 60-ball kind of games, which they might get into once they get to the SEC tournament.
Yeah, when you get in the SEC tournament, when you get into the NCAA tournament, possessions are more important. So you don't see teams turn it over as much. You don't see poor shot selection by many teams either.
Yeah.
So with Tennessee the other night, you mentioned the free throws. They're 9 out of 21 at the foul line. That's awful.
Yeah.
They also, and I know the stats are not going to reflect this, I didn't think their three-point defense was that good because I thought South Carolina missed at least a dozen wide-open threes.
Yes.
That's not great defense.
Some of them just rimmed out. Like they were good looks, just didn't fall in their favor. This
Yeah.
game could have been completely lopsided in the opposite direction had they been a little bit better.
You give up that many wide-open shots to somebody else, they might drain them. So that was a little bit of a concern in that game. Now, you mentioned Lanier. He had 20 of his 23 points in the second half.
Yeah.
And then Jahmai Ziegler doesn't even score in the first half. I don't think he scored until the last 2 minutes of the game when he finally made a free throw.
Yes, that was
And
his
they still
only
won.
point. Yes.
They have shown that they can win without Ziegler having a big game. He's had several games where he didn't score in the first half and turned it on in the second half.
Yeah.
This time he didn't score in the first half. He never turned it on in the second half. So, in fact, I didn't think he played very well in that game. But I know he's a heck of a player. There aren't many point guards that I would want in the country going into postseason play than Jahmai Ziegler.
It's important to make the right decisions, like when to go for it on 4th down, or when to kick the field goal or go for the touchdown. It's also important to make the right insurance decisions, too. That's why my office, Trey McAdams State Farm, is here to help you select the right protection at the right price. Our office will make sure you understand your State Farm coverages, so you'll know what to expect when the unexpected happens. With Trey McAdams State Farm, it's easy to make the right call. When you want the real deal, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Proud sponsor of the Tennessee Vols.
They have 11 quad 1 wins. Especially if you compare that to teams like Duke, it's just laughable how much tougher Tennessee's schedule is and then how many times they came out on the winning side of this tough schedule. And I think that will pay dividends, hopefully, in tournament play.
I don't know how many quad 1 wins Tennessee had a year ago, but I'm sure it wasn't 11.
No.
The other part of that is, get a load of this. So North Carolina's fighting to get in the tournament. North Carolina's record against quad 1 opponents, 1-11.
Oh,
I think Auburn's won maybe 14 quad 1
yes,
wins, something like that.
It's unreal, yeah.
So Tennessee's right there among the nation's best in that regard. The 8 ranked wins is the most ever in program history. So they have been able to do that. They have beaten 3 teams that at the time were ranked in the top 10. One was Alabama, one was Florida, and one was Texas A&M.
Yeah.
So they have shown that they can beat the better teams. They lost to Auburn by 2 points on the road, and Auburn's ranked number 1.
Yeah.
So they are capable of playing at a really high level. It'll be interesting to see if they're able to do that. But we were talking about some of their strengths.
Yeah.
One concern that I have about them, Paige, is that I'm not crazy about Tennessee's depth right now.
Right.
To me, Jordan Gainey, you can count on him coming off the bench. He's one of the best 6 men in the country. What are you getting out of Darling Stone and Dubar? It varies.
Right.
What are you getting out of Cade Phillips? Very good against South Carolina. 15 points, 3 block shots.
Took over, yeah.
But against Ole Miss, he got benched and played 6 minutes. So their bench is not consistently strong.
That worries you a little bit when you look at, do we want Tennessee to win the SEC tournament? It's like, they don't have the bodies to maybe do that and then have a long NCAA tournament run. I mean, we just heard Kim Caldwell the other week talk about her team being tired, and she's got like 20 players on her team. So how is Tennessee going to do that with like 4 or 5 people on their team, it feels like at times? And I think maybe the benefit, if I continue the monologue, is just put them out there. Give D-Stone reps, give Bishop Boswell reps, maybe even a little bit for Cade Phillips, and just see how they do. Win or lose these games with your bench. Maybe allow your starters to sit out a little bit longer, but maybe try and strengthen up the bench who needs maybe some valuable game time.
You don't have a lot of time to do that.
No, you have 1 game at minimum to be able to try and do that. But I think if you're trying to save your legs, that almost seems like your only option.
Well, I think they should have done a better job of getting more minutes during the season for their bench. When I look at Zakai Ziegler, I don't know if it makes any difference if he plays 34 minutes or 32 minutes in a game, right? The guy looks like the Energizer Bunny. He can just keep going, right?
Yes.
And the others, I haven't really noticed the others being tired at this point, so maybe they're okay. But my bigger concern from the bench is just being productive when you're in there.
Yes.
And I don't think, look, nothing against Brian Boswell. I don't know that he's ready, or Bishop Boswell. I don't know if he's ready to step in and play at tournament time and contribute at a winning level. I don't know that Dauer is either. I think Cade Phillips is more capable out of that group. And this is where it comes back to, it would certainly help you if you had a J.P. Estrella, another big man inside.
So I think if you had to like rank those 3 bench guys, obviously you have to start with Cade. I do think then next you go to D-Stone and then Boswell.
Yes.
As the strength that you have. And I think maybe the last couple of games, I think D-Stone has looked a little bit better. I like the limited numbers and minutes that he gave Tennessee against South Carolina. He at least looked a little confident. If maybe they play Texas again, maybe do we get that same version of D-Stone who was like dunking on everybody and talking all sorts of trash? If that's the version of D-Stone that we get starting tomorrow, then I have no concerns with what Tennessee can do. But if we have the D-Stone that isn't crashing on defense, maybe is missing a little bit of open shots on offense. I know you and I were talking press row. There was one open 3 that he could have taken from the corner, and he just passed it up.
Right.
Those errors or lapses, I think, will cost this team greatly if the bench makes those types of mistakes moving forward.
Yeah, and so if you look at the bench, so you've not seen Darling Stone play. He's from Hofstra.
Yes.
He didn't play in a lot of big games, in particular at tournament time.
No.
We haven't seen Boswell do that either. He's a true freshman.
Yes.
Phillips has played a little bit more, but he's not been counted on to play a lot of minutes in postseason. So from that standpoint, you wonder how they would handle the big stage. I'm confident in Ziegler.
Yes.
I'm confident in Mashack. I'm confident in Gainey handling those situations. Some of the others that have not played in the biggest moments in tournament time, I mean, it's different. It is just different. There's a lot more stress, and people are getting after it, and they're playing harder, and it's a bigger moment. So how will they handle it?
Yeah.
I'm confident in about half this roster being able to do that. The other half, I don't know.
Yeah, I was just looking at D-Stone's minutes. At least in the last 3 games, he's averaging double digits, but it's 10, 11, 11. So he's not even getting substantial playing time, but I do think those 10 minutes are massive when it comes to giving the other guys rests. I think another key person that we should talk about that should be a strength to this team is Igor Milicic. He looked great to start against South Carolina, then went kind of quiet, but was great with assisting and rebounding. He is someone that they desperately need to be a shooter moving forward.
We have an exceptional group of attorneys that work here. We're all trying to be better attorneys, be better advocates for our clients, be better people.
That makes me proud to be part of the team when I see how much the attorneys care about their clients. It's truly one vision. I feel like every single person who works here has that same vision, and that's to treat all of our clients like family.
We've developed such a tight-knit team. Everyone is unified in being selfless in their representation.
The Garza Law Firm. Let us help.
The other part of his game, too, is rebounding.
Yes.
He was leading the team in rebound. I think he still is, but his rebounding production has fallen off a little bit. I mean, he's a guy that I think had a 15 rebound game earlier this season. So he's capable of helping them on the boards as well.
Yeah, he's averaging 7.3. The next best is Felix Akpara at 6.3.
Yeah, so if he can continue to rebound at a high level and to hit threes, boy, that makes Tennessee a much more dangerous team.
I think so. I think the other strength to this team has to be the defense. How many close games have they won because their defense gave them extra possessions or just got stops late in the game? They need to be able to bottle that up and just replicate it the next 2 minimum games for them to be successful in the postseason.
If you were to say what's the one element of this team that I have the most confidence in going into postseason play, it is the overall defense.
I think Rick Barnes smiles when you say that.
Yeah. and he certainly emphasizes that. But we've also seen statistically, if you want to make a run in the NCAA tournament, you need to rank among the top 25 in defensive efficiency and offensive efficiency. Tennessee did a year ago. This year, they ranked in the top 5 in defensive efficiency. They're not in the top 25 in offensive efficiency. That concerns me a little bit going into the tournament.
Yeah.
We'll see. But we have seen games where they shot lights out. Now,
Yes.
we know they're capable of it. But can they do it consistently over a long period of time? In tournament play, we'll see.
Yeah, and I think, too, like, on the other side of that, their defense has won them those close games when maybe their offense wasn't really shooting, and you just have to hope you don't meet a team, let's say, like Alabama, who is in a game where they're shooting lights out, who just went to overtime with Auburn. Of course, the version that they got at home was great. Tennessee was able to beat that version, but if they come to a team that's in that 40% efficiency, like, I get a little nervous with that.
Yeah, and Tennessee, I mean, they can win playing in the 60s. They can. But you run a risk of that in the and I'm going to go NCAA tournament more so than SEC tournament because that's more important. But you run the risk of another team getting hot.
Yeah.
You run the risk of one guy firing in 25 points on a given night, and you can't stop him. And the next thing you know, you get beat 67 to 64. So that's a bit of a concern. They cannot have long droughts offensively in postseason play. They need to avoid that. A key guy in that is Lanier. Another key guy in that is Ziegler.
Yeah.
Whether Ziegler's scoring or assisting.
Yeah.
He needs to make sure that the offense is running smooth enough to where teams don't reel off 12-0 runs against them.
Yeah, I don't know if you're able to dig yourself out of that, even if you have one of the National Defensive Players of the Year and Jahmai Mashack on your side. But having someone like that, and especially what he has been doing, I think will probably end up being the secret or, at this point, well-known weapon for Tennessee.
What we haven't talked about much out of that South Carolina game was their leading scorer and their best player. He scored 7 points.
Yeah.
Who was guarding him most of the game? Mashack.
Yep.
So if you got a guy like Mashack to put against the opponent's best player, that's almost a luxury that Coach Barnes has. A.G. Hines Company. They've been around for over 100 years, selling building materials since anyone can remember. Andrews Physical Therapy at Blaine and Strawberry Plains. That's where I've gone to rehab my knee, shoulder, and elbow. When rubbing a little dirt on it ain't good enough. To create extra possessions for Tennessee and to make his free throws, I think will be a massive contribution. It would be. And so I think he's a big key for Tennessee in the postseason. So is Ziegler. And Lanier's another one. I mean, he's a guy that I'm not going to put him quite in that Dalton Connett range where Connett would take over game. But he got 20 points in the second half against South Carolina, and they were needed. So he is a guy, he's a really good shooter. He's the only player on the team that's shooting over 40% on threes for the season. Yes. Now, interestingly enough, the only guy shooting over 40% on threes in the SEC is Mashack. I do like that. I don't care what the attempts rate is. I like the percentage number. It sounds He's
nice.
attempted about 20.
Yeah.
He hadn't shot a lot, and I'm not going to count out Clara, who's 1 for 1.
Why not? He's like
he's
the
1 for 1.
100%. So those are kind of like the strengths when we look at them. I know we've kind of teased a little bit with the concerns throughout, but I think as you last mentioned, the scoring droughts kind of also happening in a slow start. They kind of combine at times, which when they compound like that gets really worrisome. How do you think they get out of that? I know he tries to, with Chaz Lanier, he wants him to shoot a couple layups before he goes to his three to build that confidence. But do you see that being a recipe that'll work?
It's hard to predict on that. I would say for Tennessee to not get into slumps, Lanier has to make shots and Ziegler has to either make them or assist. That's the best way to get out of it. It's kind of hard to rely on anybody else offensively to do that. Are other players capable of doing it? They are, but the ones I trust the most, scoring-wise, are Lanier shooting it or Ziegler with the ball in his hands.
Yeah, I think so too. Because I think when you kind of look at some of the stats as I look through the SEC play for Tennessee, they're kind of hovering around 45% from the field, which I think is a decent clip, but I think that ends up not looking as great when you look at what they do from the three-point line, when a lot of the times it's in the 30s, high 20s. I think that takes away from decent efficiency that you get from the field.
When I looked at this stat a couple of games ago, Tennessee was shooting about 32% from three, and the opponents were shooting a little less than 30%. You need to have that mark a little bit better than that.
Yeah.
And where it is right now, I'm not sure, but and I'm not sure if that was conference games only I was looking at, but they need to improve that three-point shooting. As we've noted, they've had a first half where they went 0 for 14 on threes, 0 for 11 on threes, 0 for 9 on threes. They can't do that at this time of year.
With the threes at least. And against South Carolina, it's 28 and 22. I say Alabama, that's 38, 37%. Like when it's margins like that, you get the types of games that you're expecting to get where it's one at the free throw line and you're like, well, how did they still win the game against South Carolina? So I think, like you say, the margin has to be wider, and I think that comes with guys like Jahmai Mashack creating and disrupting on defense.
And I do like the fact that Tennessee, they have an experienced roster.
Yes.
Now, again, some of them haven't played in the bigger games, but my gosh, on senior day, they had 7 players that went through senior day. Granted, one was a walk-on, I get that. But they've got a lot of players that have played a lot of basketball. And usually at this time of the year, the more experienced teams are the ones that typically come out on top.
Does that maybe curb your concern when it comes to inconsistency because you can rely on experience to show up here?
Yes. Yeah, at tournament time. It does.
Yeah.
So I think as far as that's concerned, if you look at the SEC, and I haven't really looked at the complete rosters on all the teams in the league, but there are not many of them that have more experience than Tennessee as far as starting seniors, graduate students, so forth. They've got a lot of players that have been around. They don't have a lot of depth, but they've got a lot of – their top 6 players have played a lot of basketball.
Absolutely. All right, well, later this week we will have a more in-depth preview when it comes to the matchup in the SEC tournament, how they look. Should they have a long run or not? We'll break that down later this week. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on that conversation.